Okay, last and certainly not least, we'll be going over the Brazil League for our six for stage two of 2024. So, for my predictions for the Brazil League, I had Furia in first, just because of how good they've been for so long. Even though I knew FaZe had been like the best team domestically for a while, and but they looked like they were faltering a little bit after Manchester, so that's why I predicted this way. NIP I put number two because of the Copa do Brazil tournament right before the stage started. They were playing quite well, and they made the finals where they only lost to Furia at the end of the final, but they were playing quite well throughout the rest of the that tournament. So I thought NIP would be quite good this stage. Now for W7M and Lakewood, they're probably the most like two interchangeable teams here. I could have seen either of them um, either being fourth or fifth, or even placing higher um, as well, um, as they both seem like they match up against each other quite well. So I put them in fourth and fifth. And then for the bottom five teams, I had Black Dragons in six with the potential to go higher because, in my opinion, going into the stage, Black Dragons were probably um, the most overlooked team in Brazil. And then I had Vivo Keith Stars in seventh after they lost Hates, and then they picked up Miracle. And I can't remember if they made one other roster change. I just remember that one. I think there was one more, but I don't remember who it was. I didn't particularly watch many Vivo Keith Stars games, and if I did, it wasn't for Vivo Keith Stars. Um, but to me, they weren't. Without Hates, they wouldn't be any better, in my opinion. And then MIBR, Fluxo, and E1, in my mind, are all just going to be like the bottom feeders, and I figured that they would place between 8th and 10th in that sort of fashion somewhere. So now for the group stage, we ended up having W7M and Liquid ended up being the two teams that ended up placing in first instead of and and then FaZe and Furia went down to fourth and fifth. NIP were certainly better than last stage, but they weren't as good as I thought they could be, and they ended up getting sixth. And then the biggest surprise for me, the stage was E1 had an incredibly hot start to the stage. They won a bunch of games at the start, and they kind of faltered a little at the end, falling down to third place, but they were in first place for a majority of the stage. Um, and then Furia definitely stumbling a bit this stage as well. Still playing well, but not as well as I had anticipated, of course. And then we also had, I did predict that MIBR and Fluxo would be in the bottom three, and they were. The biggest fall off also here in my predictions was that I had Black Dragons being like my underrated team in the stage, but they went 0-9 in the regular stage and only won a total of 33 rounds. So yeah, not a good group stage from Black Dragons. But however, we will later see as to why I put them as my most overlooked team still this stage, because there is certainly more to come from Black Dragons. Um, so for playoffs, the E1 fall off kind of continued here, where they got bounced in the first round 2-0 by Furia, and they did win their fifth place seeding match by NIP, but at that point, after losing to Furia, they were already out of playoff contention. And then also NIP getting 2-0 by FaZe, and then in the upper bracket semis was pretty predictable. The two teams that I thought in my mind were the better teams in this stage both won their games, being Liquid and FaZe. And then for the FaZe Liquid final, FaZe again proved that they own the Brazil region when it comes to domestic play. And then for the major qualification match, it's the current W7M versus the team that was previously with W7M, and we had the current W7M ended up beating Furia 2-0 and sending Furia down to the LCQ. So this is the being the biggest slip that this Furia roster has seen um, in almost 2 years of pretty much dominance from them internationally and in the region as well. Um, so for the final standings, we had FaZe, Liquid, and W7M for second and third. And we had Furia, E1, and then NIP fall down to the LCQ. And then Keat Stars, MIBR, Fluxo, and Black Dragons all go into the LCQ open quals. So for the LCQ, this is where we see the Black Dragons resurgence after a horrible group stage. They come out and then they win the whole LCQ and then go to the major, and they beat Furia in a pretty tight final to go there as well. And then this is the first international tournament without this Furia / old W7M lineup in quite some time. I think definitely in over 2 years. So yeah, definitely quite the fall off from them. I mean, this year in general as well, because they lost in Manchester in quarterfinals, but they were all right in Manchester at least, and they still had a very good Swiss stage in Manchester. But yeah, not a good stage here from Fury at all. But probably a well-deserved break. They've been working their asses off for so long now. So perhaps a break will do them good before the Sixth Invitational. So yeah, for other teams, again, Furia struggled in the first quarterfinal game, dropping a map to Elevate Academy, but they were able to come back and win 2-1, and beating Fluxo in the semis after Fluxo 2-0 MIBR in a close 2 maps. And we had the E1 fall off continue. They lost to Black Dragons in the first round. Yep, fraudulent team once again. At least this time they didn't make the major. So we don't have to watch that disaster class. Even though I think they're a better team than they were at the last major, I still don't think they're very good. And then the NIP fall off also continues, where they got first rounded by Keat Stars. And then, yeah, Keat Stars lost to Black Dragons. And then, as I said previously, Black Dragons went to qualify for the major, which I was really happy to see, because last stage I thought all of Black Dragons was just a really underrated team in general. And I actually thought they would qualify to the major last stage, but they didn't. They kind of had a rough go with it in the playoffs and then the LCQ. But this time it cost them a horrible stage for a blessing in the last chance qualifier. So good to see a new young team and kind of a legacy Oregon Siege as well, back at the majors as well, but coming in with a new young and team that's probably very hungry to win. So I'm excited to actually see Black Dragons play at the major. So these are our teams heading to the major again. We got FaZe, Liquid, W7, and Black Dragons. So for my team awards, I'm going to have E1 as the most surprising team in kind of both ways, where at the start of the stage I felt they were like overperforming expectations, and then because of those expectations they settled on themselves for playing so well at the start of the stage, and when they started playing really bad, and so then their expectations, the surprise factor completely flipped. They went from, oh my god, they're cooking everyone, to, oh my goodness, they're getting cooked by everyone. So very, very weird stage from E1 in general, where I don't really know what happened. So most overrated team, I mean, I put Furia in my number 1 spot in predictions, and they didn't make the major, so kind of have to put them there. Worst roster changes for me probably had to go to Vivo Keed. as I mean they lost Hates, who in my mind was their best player last stage, and they made some roster changes that I didn't think would really improve their team, um, and it didn't. So yeah, that's what Vivo Keystars stay in the worst roster changes section. So the most underrated team, I had it. I've been preaching the Black Dragons for a while now, um, ever since last stage, and I think they deserve to be like the most underrated team this stage. I think they very much underperformed in the regular stage, and then performed how I thought they would in the regular stage in the LCQ, where they would actually like win. Or they're just like really bad in best of ones and just a good best of three team. We could have that situation as well. Um, for clutch team of the stage, I mean, I have to give it to FaZe. Um, the roster is just so well rounded. The players are just always putting themselves in position to clutch, and just so many of them have come up clutch for FaZe so many times this stage. So I feel like it has to go to them. Now for best roster changes, even though they didn't have an amazing stage, I had to give it to NIP because NIP were horrible last stage, and weren't amazing this stage, like I said, but they were still much better than they were in stage one. And the two changes they made by picking up Hates and Fantasy definitely felt like made NIP a much better team than they were previously. So I still feel like even though they came short of my expectations, NIP still had some good changes and this stage. So now for my player rewards. So for my MVP, I actually took Volps instead of any player from Liquid or FaZe, who are the top two players of the league. Volps has just been insane this stage. I think he's also like plus 50, either plus 40 something or plus 50 something this stage. And he has been like dragging W7M through the mud through a lot of their games. And I just feel like Volps pops off every game, and that he's just one of the most like individually skilled players in Brazil um, this entire past year. And I mean, I felt like Volps was also like one of the best players in Brazil when he was on the previous iteration of W7M as well, before he spent a year on Liquid as well. I also felt Volps was one of their best players during that period as well. So good to see again Volps back in his um, basically prime state to where he was at before. So yeah. Now, from my most improved player, I had to give it to Raps. Raps went from the worst rated player in the league last season or last stage to the best rated player on his team. Not the best rated player on in the league, but the best rated player on his team at least, putting up also just much better numbers than last stage. As I said, he was literally the worst rated player in the league in stage one. So now for clutch player of the stage, I had to give it to Vida King. I mean, he plays support for the best team in the league, and anytime you need him to clutch, he'll do it for you. He's always putting himself in the right position to clutch when he has to. I think he also led the league in 1vx's as well. This stage, I think he had 7 1vx's, I believe. So I think deservedly so. It goes to Vida King. Best rookie, um, I think by basically default it went to Machina. I don't think there was any other rookies this stage. I can't remember if Vivo Keystars also had a rookie, um, but in my mind, Machina as a player who I had never seen play before coming into his first stage, I thought he put up a solid stage for MIBR and was definitely one of MIBR's highlights, which there weren't many of this stage. For my underrated player of the stage, I'm gonna give it to Stemp Vivo Keystars. I thought there was a point in the LCQ where Stemp might drag Vivo Keystars to the LCQ final, um, because he was playing so well and just getting so many kills. But in the end, it wasn't enough. But definitely, again, one of the highlights for Vivo Keystars on a rather um, poor season from them. And then for me, my overrated player of the stage had to be Mitrix. I thought Mitrix would be pretty good. Would he be even better this stage after a pretty strong stage one? But he was a big disappointment for me on Fluxo. I think he was their worst rated player, um, and they really needed him to be performing at a high level for them to be able to compete, and they just weren't able to compete because they couldn't rely on Mitrix like they were last stage to make a bunch of plays. So yeah. And now for my All Brazilian Pro team, I had to include Volps. I picked him as my MVP of the stage, so he also goes on the All Pro team again as well, leading the league in KD and leading W7M to a major berth in Montreal. So I also took Palu from Liquid, a big reason why Liquid was so good at this stage. And Palu's definitely, and also playing on a much more supportive role, playing a lot more hard breach, playing a lot more of the site player role, or the or even like it's kind of like a despot spot where he's just always in engagements with like mute shotgun or something, where he's just like, oh, always just holding an important spot on the map. Um, Very impressed me on that role. Played very well. I think he had like a plus 40 KD this stage for Liquid and a very high rating. And as I said earlier, one of the big reasons why Liquid are so good this stage. And then for the rest of my All Brazilian Pro team is all phase players. Um, I can't really justify putting any other players from any other teams, even though there were other players on other teams who had good ratings and played well, like JV92 or KZ or Maya as well. I could have also put in here. I just felt that that phase had been so good this stage, and that Vita King, Handy, and Souls had all just individually had such a good stage, along with phase getting first once again this stage. Um, des- they deservingly earned their spots on my All Brazilian Pro team. So yeah, like all of them, like very clutch, perfect in their roles, um, and huge reasons why phase are as good as they are. So yeah, that's why I have all three of them in my All Brazilian Pro team. So this concludes my stage 2 recap for EU, NA, and Brazilian teams. So yeah, again, if you enjoyed watching, feel free to let me know. Also, again, if there's improvements that I can make, also feel free to let me know. And also feel free to like or subscribe because it helps algorithm apparently. So yeah, have a good one.